Hello, everyone. We're just going to start the night with Marissa giving an opening and a welcome. Hug squile. Tanoya, Tanonsia Mansiaya, Nechem Koshaman, Mercenahini, Queensna, Squamish, Ochamelka, A Niska, Ochamelka, Ananostans, Qualun Teats. How's everyone following so far? Perfect. Awesome. You guys are welcome. Thank you. You can be seated. My ancestral name is Mechcheum. My English name is Marissa Nahini. I come from the Squamish and Nisga'a peoples, and we welcome you to the traditional territories of the three host nations, the Chamasquayum, Squamish, and Saleototh. Also anglicized to Musqueam, Squamish, and Saleototh. A little easier to say. We have been here on these lands since time immemorial. So thank you so much for inviting me to do a land acknowledgement. Even though it may seem like standard protocol today, it wasn't like this 20 years ago. I have been performing and singing and dancing all over the world, from being seen as Hollywood Indians to respected human beings. We are the change that we want to see. In many places that you may go, whether you come from humble beginnings or a silver spoon, each and every single one of us can make ripple effects. Myself, I come from a humble beginning where we only had $10 a month, and that got us enough of a food crate. My family, we survived off of traditional foods of meat, elk, moose, fish, lots of salmon. So you look so young. You're like, 20 years, how old is she? But don't worry, that's our secret. But with these humble beginnings, I didn't know we were not rich. I didn't know that we had no food. I didn't know that we had no money. I didn't realize that when we went to go do a big shop at the store, we only bought a sack of rice and a sack of potatoes. But we still ate these amazing foods. Trying to go in downtown for a salmon dinner, that was our humble meals. But what I want to say is the love of our land. I grew up listening to elders and teachers talk about the Siwash walk, as Slakalsh. This man, he prepared himself every morning. He knew that he was going to have a newborn baby. So he swam across Stanley Park to North Vancouver every day. And at the end of his lifetime, the Transformer brothers, there was 4 of them called the Chais brothers. They were the ones that finished the Creator's work. And they're the ones that changed and transformed the land to what we see today. And so when Slakalsh stands there, we see this. And we see that this is an honorable man. To honor him and say, thank you. Thank you for all of your hard work, and because you've done such hard work, we're going to put you in this amazing place of honor. The same with our sisters. You may know them as Alliance, but we know them as the sisters who are twins. They're maidens, and they lived in our territories, and we used to war a lot. And one of the northern tribes came down and raided our village. And we have a sacred time when women become women, that they're isolated to do their training. But while these 2 ladies were isolated, there's 2 princes in the war canoe. And they had to stay back to watch the war canoe, which they didn't really like that much. So, as young men do, they wandered off. And they seen these beautiful women, and they took them, and they kidnapped them to be their wives. And typically, they'd be turned into slaves. We're not shy to say we had, the King of Thrones here in BC. but they were treated so well. The husbands wanted them as wives, and they were treated as princesses, as they would be traditionally as princes' wives. They wore the best regalia. They were given the best opportunities. They were fed the best food. But yet they snuck all the time into the woods to cry by themselves. And as the 2 men heard this, they were heartbroken. And they didn't understand Do we not feed you well? Do we not give you food? Do we not provide you with babies? And they said, yes, I'm sorry. We cry alone because we don't want to know you to know how sad we are. We're sad because our father doesn't know we're alive. He doesn't know that he has grandchildren. And this overwhelmed the husbands, and they begged their father, the war chief, to do an introduction with the Squamish people. Very unheard of. So they sent a runner down. So instead of an email through Facebook, they sent a man all the way down, and it took him a month to run to Vancouver. He canoed, he ran, he came here, and the Squamish agreed. And down they came, and they paddled, and they feasted. And if it took a month for them to get here, they weren't staying for one day. Our feast could last for maybe a short one, couple days, and then a short one a week, but they usually typically last about a month. And then we would send them home with food, so no one would ever go home hungry. And then the Creator smiled upon these two maidens and was so grateful that they stopped the Great War, and that they pushed them at the end of their life to be the two lions, the two sisters. This is our symbol of peace. This is our symbol that the war is over. This is showing that we are no longer at war with one another. We live in peace together. So when we talk about climate change, and when we have a lot more people coming to our lands, we get worried. We get worried. Do you love the land the way we love our land? Will you see the land that we see the land? Is that we don't see this as a place of resources, as commodity, how to make the most and not worry about the future in 7 generations. Because I would love my grandnephews to have a better life than I lived. I would like my nephew to know what it's like to eat the food out of the water. My father, he used to be able to go right to this water, eat the clams, eat the crab. We used to go hunting under Landscape Bridge for geese and ducks. And now we can't eat anything. We are starved out of our own land. So my prayer to you is you're doing it. You have been here. You guys are world-class citizens of the world. You guys are an inspiration. I thank you from the humblest part of my heart, because this is the most generous gift you can give. Showing up, chinchinstwai, lifting one each other up. This is what it means to be a part of the human race, is not to worry how much money I could put in my pocket. Is how can I best serve and support everyone? Because when we live in that, we all live rich. I thank you. Thank you for being here. I hope you have a wonderful time. And I'm going to sing you a celebration song because this is a celebration. This one is composed by notarial. He is from the Squamish Nation. And it talks about, come on, let's go. Let's have a great time. You know, sometimes we need that one person to act a little bit more sillier. And then the other person be like, I don't want to do it, but I'll act silly too. And then they're like, wow, those two cool people are acting silly. I want to act silly too. And then the next thing you know, we're all doing it. So let's create the ripples in the water. Here's a celebration song. Hi-yo, hi-yo, ho, ho, hi-yo, hi-yo, ho, hey, hi-yo, hi-yo, ho, hey, was geht namens la ocean, nach Hause soll come, tis wild, tis seeds, hi-yo, hi-yo, ho, hey, hi-yo. Hoichka, Hosiam. Have a wonderful event. The organizers have worked so hard. Have you seen all of our emails? You would know, but just know that you guys are wanted here, and it's amazing, and you're the prayers that our ancestors wished for. Have a wonderful event. I apologize, I cannot stay. My nephew's turned 17, so I'm gonna go wish him a very happy birthday. Hoichka, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Marissa. I just wanted to say a couple words about you. I first met you at Camp Suzuki, and I remember you sharing that story about the two sisters. And I think it's the first time that I unlearned, like the lions, and relearned these are the two sisters, and that deep connection and that love to land, I think, is so important. And thank you so much for grounding this conversation. I have a long bio for you, but I think really just your authenticity, your creativity, your song, your words, and the story that you shared, the wisdom that you shared with us tonight speaks to all of that. So, Haishka, I lift my hands up to you. Thank you. Wonderful. Hello, everyone. Welcome to You, Me, and CleanBC. I'm so excited to have you all here today. This has been really a dream come true for me for, I think, many, many years in my imagination, and to see all of you here today in this room is so exciting. My name is Tessica Trong. Some of you might know me as from under that name. For my grandmother, and for my grandpa, who gave me another name, for my family and for my sister as well, who shares a couple of Chinese characters with me. I'm also Zhang Shiying. I've been trying to name and to share my Chinese name as well as part of unlearning the internalized racism that I've learned growing up here on these lands. I'm a dialogue associate here at the SFU Center for Dialogue, and for the past year have been serving and have had the pleasure of serving on BC's Climate Advisory Council, advising Minister Heyman, who is our Minister of Environment and Climate Change. But for tonight, I'm just your host and your facilitator for this evening. And as your host, I want to make sure that your needs are being taken care of to the best of our abilities. So first off, we have food and drinks. They're just out the corner if you haven't noticed that already. Feel free at any time if you haven't grabbed food. If you need to use the washrooms, they're out either this door, or you can go out that door and then come around this way. There are gender-neutral bathrooms downstairs as well on the second floor, but if you don't need them, the bathrooms here are on the third floor. There's also elevators for those of you who might have an accessibility need. And then other than that, I know that this space can feel a little bit formal. It's the WAS Center, so just make yourself feel comfortable here. Like if you don't want to sit and you've been sitting all day, feel free to stand. If you want to sit on the floor, if you need to stretch, if you need to move, that's totally welcome. I want you to make sure that you feel welcome in this space. And so it's your responsibility as well to take care of yourself and also to take care of each other. So feel free to check in with others if you're noticing that folks are tired, or to ask if other people need things as well. I just wanted to also point out a couple other folks in the room who have been critical in making this event possible, and that can also help you in the case you have any questions and I'm not available. So first off, Alana, who's here from the Climate Action Secretariat, but she's also been so critical in helping make this event possible. Also Nastanka and Sarah, Nastanka right there, who's waving in the back, and Sarah as well. They're both from PICS, which is the Pacific Institute for Climate Solutions, as well. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that organization because they do a lot of amazing work. And finally, Imran as well, if you want to just wave. I think a lot of you might have met him at the registration desk, but if you have any questions, feel free to also ask him as well. So truly tonight wouldn't have been possible without the support of the government of BC, and Jeremy, who's here, the Assistant Deputy Minister of Environment and Climate Change, will be speaking a little bit more about the government of BC and the work from the Climate Action Secretariat. But I wanted to maybe just share a little bit more about PICS, the Pacific Institute for Climate Solutions, for those of you who aren't familiar with this organization. They're a research and engagement network oriented towards delivering high-impact climate solutions that are actively applied by decision makers. And so PICS shares a global vision of net negative greenhouse gas emissions by mid-century along all communities adapting to climate change. So they develop impactful evidence-based climate change solutions through collaborative partnerships, which seek to connect solution seekers with experts from BC's 4 leading research universities. So PICS is hosted at UVic, the University of Victoria, in collaboration with UBC, as well as Simon Fraser University, SFU, and the University of Northern British Columbia, so Northern UNBC. And they run an internship program as well as a PICS Scholar program and support events like this. So if you're interested in learning more about that organization, feel free to chat to Nastenka, to Sarah, and we also have a panelist who is a PICS Scholar, Thomas, here. So I'm sure you can ask questions to him about the Scholars program and the internship program, or look online as well if you are interested about that. In terms of the agenda for tonight, it's happening in 2 parts. So the first part of tonight is really about listening deeply and learning about what climate action is already happening, and we're very lucky to be joined by an amazing panel of youth that are doing, youth and young leaders that are doing amazing work here in Metro Vancouver, as well as representatives from the province who will be sharing a little bit about CleanBC, which is the provincial climate strategy. And then the second part of the conversation is really driven by all of us here in this room. The intent is that it's a dialogue driven by your own passions, your curiosities, your interests, and what's important to you. And so this is, for me, I think the space where the magic happens, where there's room to dream up possibilities and collaborations and to be generative and to support existing initiatives and to grow initiatives from, I think, the seed of an idea into projects and actions on the ground. So that's really, really exciting for me. But without further ado, I think we'll kick off this panel of young leaders. I think I want to acknowledge that, as you probably have noticed, the tech is out, and so we've called someone to see if that can be resolved, but hopefully... Oh, is that the situation? Do you want to check it? Yes. Sorry, this is Sarah's computer. Oh, there we go. There we go. I'm not the tech whiz, and I appreciate that. Yes. Woo! Awesome. Great. And so I think often when we think about the climate crisis and we stare at it in the face, it can be quite bleak. Like climate grief is real, and our feelings of loss and fear and rage and hopelessness, I think, are really valid. I think a lot of us in this generation feel that really deeply because we understand the gravity of the challenge ahead of us. And at the same time, I think that hopefully tonight these stories and the work of these amazing young leaders can be a bit of an antidote for that hopelessness. I hope that you'll feel inspired by these amazing 4 leaders. And I think it's also a moment for us to pause and to reflect and to really celebrate all the young climate leaders on the stage here, but also I'm sure in the room. I know so many of you are also doing incredible work on this, and our collective work together, intergenerationally, to look at what government is doing, to look at what organizations and educational institutions are doing as well, and to figure out where are those moments, where are those places for synergy and for weaving pieces together. So, and I think I really want to really celebrate the work that's happening. I think to really give credence as well to what Marissa was saying. I think maybe we're a little bit too serious about all of this, and certainly there's a gravity to the matter, but I think we can also have a little fun and support each other in that. So we will kick it off by having Adriana Lauren join us. Oh yes, Wi-Fi info, but that's on your table. And here we go. I'm going to read a bit of her bio. I know some of you have already gotten it in your inbox, but she's a recent UBC alumni from the Faculty of Land and Food Systems. She's originally from Honduras in Central America and is passionate about social justice, climate change, and food security. She's also a former member of Love Intersections, a group of queer people of color who believe that storytelling is a powerful agent of change. And she is the co-founder of UBC Climate Hub and currently works as their projects and administrator, and also works for the Faculty of Land and Food Systems as a resource assistant for GRS 390 class. And I've just noticed on the slides, her pronouns are missing, but they're she, her, hers. And with that, please join me in welcoming Adriana.
does this work? No? Yeah? Okay. Can everyone hear me? Yes. Okay. Amazing. And actually, I think I'm going to go up there because I need to do the slides. So, oh. Yeah, I'll just go up. I think that's just easier. Sorry about that, y'all. As Jessica was saying, my name is Adriana, and I'm the co-founder and the current projects administrator for the UBC Climate Hub. And I'm really passionate about social justice issues and youth engagement and the intersectionality of climate change, which I'll be talking about in the second portion of the event. And just some background on myself, I'm originally from Honduras in Central America, so that's this small country right there. I grew up on the coast, so I have directly felt the impacts of climate change. This is an image from Hurricane Mitch that happened in 1998. It was a devastating hurricane. It was one of the deadliest in the last 100 years. And I've seen my city underwater already, and I know what that looks like. And I know the devastation that comes along with it, and that's a reason why I'm so passionate about climate, because to me, it's really about my community and the people who I grew up with and my home, and making sure that there is a home for future generations too, and preserving that culture too. So I think that's a really important part of the work I do, and it's also helped me understand how climate change is actually an intersectional social justice issue, and I try to embed that into the work I do. So one of the ways that I try to do that through my work at UBC, so I recently graduated from UBC, but I was one of the co-founders of the UBC Climate Hub, and we started as a really grassroots kind of student activism. We found that there was a need for a collective space filled with joy and filled with youth around climate. We need to kind of move away from working in silos and working intersectionally and in an interdisciplinary approach from a university perspective. And we really started as a group of students who said, we need the space, we're gonna create it. So we had meetings with President Ono at that time, and now we've been on our feet for about a year and a half. So it really is a success story to student activism and youth empowerment. And what we're all about, our mission is to connect university and community stakeholders to take bold climate action. And we're student-driven, we're youth-driven. We really focus on knowledge mobilization and trying to communicate climate change and kind of changing the narrative around that too, because again, it was mentioned before, it can often feel quite depressing, but there's so much joy to be found in the movement as well, especially with the people you get to work with. And kind of fostering that sense of agency amongst youth, and really kind of having a justice-centered approach to climate. One of the things we always love to do at all of our events is we end them with a dance party, because we can talk about these like really sad, depressing things, but we also need to find that joy. So I think that's something that's really important, and finding that like moment to be silly and just happy. So anyway, that's kind of what we do. And these are some of the projects we've been working on. So in October, we had a nonpartisan campaign for voting buddies. We helped with the UBC climate strike on September 27th. We had the Climate Solutions Showcase every year, where we kind of showcase climate solutions and some of the research happening on campus to mobilize knowledge. We also have one of the exciting projects we're working on is an asset map. This is like a very basic prototype where we're digitally mapping out the different assets on campus divided by people, projects, and organizations. So it's kind of like a digital database of everything that's happening on campus so everyone can stay connected. We're gonna be launching that hopefully in April. And then we've also been doing lots of youth climate ambassador workshops with high school students, just because there's been so much incredible momentum coming from high school students, and we really want to be able to mobilize that and give students that sense of hope and agency as well. So that's kind of what we do in a nutshell, and what we kind of want to see a little bit more about in the future, moving forward. We love organized, interdisciplinary, collaborative, youth-driven climate action. That's a mouthful. We're working on creating that on campus, but we love to see that off campus as well. We really love knowledge mobilization and being able to translate research into action and making sure that research is also accessible to non-academic audiences. We also love community engagement and events like these and making sure we really bring climate to the people. And also kind of our motto for things is #voice, volunteer, vote. So voice, speak up on climate, volunteer, put your time into this. It's an issue we all care about, and vote if you're eligible. And then the most important one that I think is super important is making sure to center justice into everything you do. Climate change is an intersectional social justice issue. We cannot forget that, and it needs to be a core part of the work we do. So, and that's me, yes. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. Brady, can I? Yeah, of course.
Is that cool?
Yeah, totally. Come hang out with me. Can I introduce you to the group?
Yeah.
Okay. So Brady is a Métis youth and a part of the Métis Nation of BC. She first started climate change initiatives in her local high school a decade ago with the removal of bottled water from her school vending machines. Brady went on to pursue academic studies in environmental subjects, completing a Bachelor's of Science in Biology, a Master's of Forestry, and a postgraduate diploma in Conservation and Land Management, so environment from a lot of different angles. And outside of work and studies, Brady strives to encourage climate change awareness through educational programs, in particular with Indigenous youth, organizing waste cleanups, and working collaboratively to develop more opportunities for Métis youth to be involved with climate change initiatives and to develop their own. So please join me in welcoming Brady.
Yeah, that sounds easier. All right, so Tansei Kiwa Brady Nitsiga-san. Hello, everyone. My name is Brady. As she mentioned, I am Métis. I'm also Cree on my mother's side, so I really like to acknowledge that. From near Prince Albert, Saskatchewan, for anyone that actually knows Saskatchewan. But on my father's side, I also like to acknowledge him, pretty much Irish, but he's from Prince Edward Island. And so I wanted to start off just basically kind of starting off where I went with this journey and how I got to this position here, how I got to the panel here today. And I really wanted to think about, what grounds me in my climate change work. So really, I kind of went back to home and my original interest starting there. I think for many people that I've talked to and many youth, their home aspect really comes into play. And I mean, we already heard it start off with our first speaker. And so that's kind of where I started off. I was really fortunate to grow up in the Kootenays, which is on Tunaha and Squamish territory. And I was, blessed with the Rocky Mountains, lakes, some of the most beautiful nature that we have in Canada. And that's honestly, I think, where it started. And so I went and pursued a Bachelor's of Biology, but I went to the East Coast to experience something different. I did it in Newfoundland. But it wasn't until my third year, actually, that I switched into heavy environmental. I was pre-med for a while. Thought that was the direction. And then I took a field course, and I was like, why do I want to spend my days in a hospital? This is awesome. So it was really my academics that started me off there. And some of the best work experience that I actually got was during my summers. So I had to work. I mean, I was trying to pay for university. I was the first one to actually attend university in my family. So it was a big deal to me to make money in the summer. And some of the jobs that I got to do, I was just honestly fortunate enough to get them. So Nature Conservancy was one that I did. I did a lot of conservation work, habitat assessment, bat biology work in doing bio-blitzes down in the Flathead. And then another experience I got to have was also learning about my culture. So on the far side is actually Devil's Club, for anyone that's come across it. It's kind of a nasty plant to most, but it's used in a lot of traditional medicines. So it was something that I got to learn through that work experience, and then it kind of started getting integrated into what I wanted to do. But before I go into where I kind of started going with research, is in the work experience, I actually got to see some of these impacts, and I hadn't really felt the impacts of climate change until that work experience. And so whitebark pine was the first one. It's an endangered species here in BC, and climate change is just going to increase that decline. The southern mountain population of our caribou, I'm not sure if many people know about that, also endangered, something I came across in my work. And the third one was during university. I had the chance to do some science education up north in the most northern community in Labrador, which is Nain. And this is where the climate impacts really hit me hardest, is because this is a community that relies on that knowledge from hundreds of years, not only for hunting, but also for their travel routes to get to community, to get to their place of where they practice their traditional knowledge. Traditional land use, and it was just devastating to see that because of climate change, it's impacting the sea ice and impacting that community's traditional knowledge in such a huge way. So I put a red circle because honestly, after those moments for me, it felt like the research and moving into everything was more immediate, more pressured. I kind of felt, that anger that, we let it get this far. And so I started doing a lot more research jobs, doing conservation work with tardigrades for forest genetics. It was really weird, but they were trying to use tardigrades to look at forest conservation, but also working in other conservation labs, looking at the boreal forest, which again is also being impacted heavily by climate change. And for anyone that's worked in research, we realize that our research, unfortunately, does not get taken up that often into policy. So I moved into policy to try and start bringing some of the research in. And I worked actually with the BC government in their tree improvement branch, where they have a policy that's called the climate seed. I'm forgetting the name of it right now because I'm blanking. But anyways, it's basically moving tree seed from different areas to kind of mitigate the impacts on our trees that we plant. So part of that opportunity was also working with coastal First Nations at the time, and with them I was collecting data and all of this traditional knowledge was going into it, and I realized that it's not just about the policy, it's also about being on the ground and getting back to my culture. And so I realized that I needed to start spreading this to my other peers, the other youth, and I started working and doing more youth cultural stories, and basically taking our cultural stories and sharing them to say, we have these stories that have been around for hundreds of years, and they teach us things that we need to know, and we need to bring in. We need to bring those back in. And somehow we lost those over the generations, but it's so important to bring those back. And then I realized I did more academics, so I actually realized, though, that international was a great experience. I went over to the United Kingdom, and that's where I did some work in conservation and land management and got introduced to an entire international crowd at the conference, which is at Cambridge University. It's one of the largest and oldest conservation science conferences in the world, and it just brings in so many great minds of all these unique ideas of what they're doing in their own countries and how it actually applies to so many of our countries, so many of the same issues, just different geography, I guess, And so here I am today. My work experience is I'm now working in environmental consulting. It's something I'm super passionate about. One of my main things I'm passionate about is doing environmental management plans and basically coming up with unique ways for Indigenous communities to help mitigate some of these impacts to climate change. And although it's cut off, and this is what I'm going to be talking about in my session, is looking at the intergenerational knowledge transfer. So right now I'm helping lead with an awesome team of youth from the MNBC, which is Métis Youth, Métis Nation of BC. We are creating interest groups specific to our passions, and mine is going to be in environment and climate change, bringing my work experience, my academics, my research, my home interest, and my culture into leading that. And basically, we want people that are interested in multiple things, but passionate and coming into these groups, and we're starting it to go nationally. So yeah, anyways, that's what I'm going to be talking about, is how we transfer that knowledge to our other youth, and because it's something I'm super passionate about. So yeah, let me know if you want to chat later.
Thank you so much, Brady. And Brady's going to be leading a session during the dialogue, and so that's the conversation that she's referring to. Next up, we have Sam. And Sam is a grade 12 student strike organizer with the Sustainability Teens group. I think you might have heard of their work or been part of their climate march, where they brought over 100,000 people from our conversations, maybe closer to 170,000 people from the aerial photos. And then also Greta Thunberg to Vancouver, alongside many Indigenous leaders as well. She is a passionate climate justice activist who strives to create stronger communities and to build positive solutions. And she also serves as the chair of the Vancouver School Board Sustainability Conference and works with other local initiatives as well. So please join me in welcoming Sam. And I will say, I did tell the panelists they could either bring slides or they can speak from the heart, and Sam chose to do that.
Okay, hi everyone. I just wanted to start off by saying a huge thank you to Tessica for inviting me to come up here and speak. On behalf of Sustainability Teens and also to all the other organizers who put on this amazing event. Thank you very much. So just a little bit about who I am. I'm 17 years old. I'm in grade 12. I'm a climate strike activist, and one of the most common questions that I get asked right now at this particular time is, what are you going to study next year in university? And I hate this question because I have no idea. How am I supposed to know what I want to study for the next couple years of my life that will eventually supposedly lead me into a career that's going to be fulfilling? And, you know, in theory, that's what's going to set me up for life. But it's hard to do that as a teenager when all you hear about is the climate crisis. All that surrounds me is this thought of this impending doom, and also not even just impending, just the fact that people around the world are already facing these impacts. And because of that, I became aware of this early high school, a couple years ago, but I didn't really become aware of how severe the impacts were until just like a couple years ago. So after getting involved with some other local initiatives, I started organizing climate strikes because me and along with a bunch of other youth, we felt like our voices weren't being listened to enough. We didn't have a seat at the table, we can't vote, we didn't really have a space or a platform to say what was on our minds. And what we saw at that time was governments all around the world who failed to protect our futures and to prioritize that and to listen to the concerns that are being brought up by science and the concerns that we know exist and we know to have existed for a long time. So that's just a little bit about how Sustainability Teens was formed. So a little bit more about what we've done. Our first strike was almost a year ago, last December, so it's almost our 1-year anniversary. Since then, we've had a lot of other strikes, varying sizes. We had one in January, March, May, and of course, our biggest strike was on September 27th. And how many of you were there? That's awesome. I'm so glad that all of you were there, and that's just the kind of community and support that we're trying to build at Sustainability Teens, and that's why we exist. It's not just because of the climate crisis and because we believe that the world is ending. It's because we value joy and community and thinking about how we can build that and how important that is, because if youth like myself get caught up in the negativity of the climate crisis, how are we ever going to find the hope to think of a better future and to pursue the things that we want to? So that's one of my favorite things about Sustainability Teens, is just the sense of hope and the community and the positivity that we all bring in each other. And some of my closest friends I've made through Sustainability Teens, and it's also just the community of people like all of you here and the other amazing panelists who have been doing awesome work. And it's just seeing how much the circle has grown of people who are interested in this topic, who are aware, and that is extremely fulfilling to me, even though this is just the beginning and lots more to come. So just a little heads up about our next event. It is, I'm sure you'll all be interested. It's it's on November 29th, so in 2 weeks, and it is not so much a typical strike because, you know, we're not only about taking to the streets, blocking some roads for a few hours, and making our message heard that way, but because it's on Black Friday, we're really trying to promote alternatives to consumerism, essentially, because we know that, you know, climate change is not the fault of the individual consumers. So what we really want to do is think together, like, how can we build this world that we see in the future? Like, how can we get there? And these are the steps that we're going to take to get there. So if any of you want to get more involved with that event, we are going to be having kind of a central hub, and then we're going to be hosting little tables with things like clothing repair and little things like that, so that we can really try to envision like the world that we see in our future. I think that's about all I have. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Sam. And I can definitely reassure you that question, still figuring it out, you know? Like, it's not just when you're 17, so it's all good. I don't know if that gives you more hope or more fear. But last but certainly not least, we have Thomas, who is a researcher in energy and climate policy. He is a PhD student with SFU's Energy and Material Research Group under the supervision of Dr. Mark Jacquard. Thomas received his Bachelor's of Arts and Honors in Economics at SFU, where he focused on resource, environmental, and ecological economics, and he also attained a master's degree in research management with Dr. Jacquard, where he pursued energy in energy economy emissions modeling with urban climate policies. And Thomas hopes to use his interdisciplinary training in sustainability at SFU to continue in a career of policymaking that will contribute to the betterment of our local and global communities. So please join me in welcoming Thomas.
Thank you very much, Jessica, for the introduction, and it's a pleasure to be here. I'm so grateful that I've been invited to have the opportunity to speak with you and the breakout sessions later on. So let's begin. There's my title slide with what all the main sponsors, PICS, Emerge, Energy Materials Research Group, and of course, my home faculty, Faculty of Environment. So a quick introduction, just as Jessica said, I began with a degree in economics and undergraduate at SFU, and then I moved into a master's in resource and environmental management with Dr. Jacquard, and now I'm continuing with him as a PhD student. The research, as Jessica said, I started off with understanding what ecological and resource economics is and environmental economics and what picture that plays in the role. And then when I moved into REM, I moved into the energy and material and modeling world, which allowed me to analyze climate policy and the effects of climate policy. And then I really want to mention my collaborations with PICS, the Pacific Institute of Climate Solutions. It's been a wonderful collaboration. Where's Nastenko? She's around here somewhere. There she is. And I was working on their Built Environment project, and this was for my master's project. And for my project, I was modeling how changes in urban form and city landscapes could affect greenhouse gas emission reductions and what government can do to the urban form landscape to achieve those goals. And so I think what I'll do is I'll talk about why climate policy research and modeling for myself and why I think it's important and what it contributes to the goal of reaching our climate goals. Well, first, why do we model? We simulate complex systems. The social, ecological, and human system that we're all in is complex with a lot of variables, and to take a snapshot of that holistically is very difficult, which is why we model. We put everything in there as we can and then run the model to see what the results would be. And what does that do? Well, these are the tools, as we say, to assist policy design and climate policy design. And so when a government or we think about a policy, we use modeling to see what are the effects of those policies and where, and specifically, where do the greenhouse gas emissions come from when we analyze those policies. And as independent researchers, the service we provide to the community is we're able to verify the effects of policy in an independent way as researchers. Just like we see the IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, researchers do work in providing what the target should be. We do very similar work in verifying what the policies will be and what works and what could be worked on in the future. And I'll use a CleanBC example. This is our research associates, Navius Research. They're a private consulting group of modeling researchers. And they were contracted by the BC government to run the CleanBC policies. And I think I'm doing a little lead-in for you, Jeremy, and you'll be able to see the results of those. But this was the sort of collaboration that was very effective for all the reasons why I said in the past, and I'll just leave it there. And so I thought in my third slide, I would say, what is in a day in the life in the collaborations I do as a researcher and with government and solution seekers, as I'm using a PICS term. First of all, I had a wonderful collaboration with the Climate Action Secretariat. I went to Victoria with a fellow PhD researcher this summer, and I shared my research results from my master's, and we had a wonderful dialogue and conversation, and I heard feedback from the Climate Action Secretariat modeling team about what are the government policies that they're thinking about, and what are ways and the tools that we can provide as researchers to help them understand what the effects of those policies are. And now with that feedback and information, now I'm thinking as I start my PhD, how can my research then be impactful to society, impactful to government, and help that process along. The second collaborations I had was the SFU itself. SFU wants to be a climate leader, so both as providing the student perspective but also as a subject matter expert, I was happy to assist in some of the activities that they were doing, and I'm happy to discuss more of that in the breakout session. And the last one, these are future stakeholders that I want to start exploring. I haven't had much contact with industry yet, and I would like to explore what those relationships are like in terms of industry. If you think about it, what we wear are all the material goods. They're quite carbonized at the moment, and how do we work with them to decarbonize? And for me, that completes the triangle, working with the public sector and government, working with the research institutions, and then see what working with the private sector is like. So for my last slide, I think is the most important slide, I'd like to leave you with how can all of you engage with climate policy and walk the path that I've started walking and exploring. And one of the things, I'll give you the 3 takeaways, and I'm sure this will be predominantly what we talk about in the breakout sessions. But the one thing I found, another plug for interdisciplinarity, just like Alana was saying, and exactly. And what I found that having a bit of understanding of all of the different aspects of sustainability, we all know the Venn diagram, it's social, economic, and environmental systems. Having a bit in each of those fields allow me to have a holistic vision about what sustainability means. But even if you're like me and you specialize in either one or even 2 of those, having just a little bit in a third or all 3 is so helpful for understanding that holistic picture. The second thing I would advise, or certainly I found, was experiential learning. Not only be in the classroom learning about the policies, but try to be a practitioner of implementing policy or implementing change in wherever your environment is. And I would use the examples of these fine panelists as an example. And I know for the SFU students, I see SFU climate leaders here as well involved in the leadership there, and so they're definitely worth talking to as well to join them. And what I found is I'm able to learn at the same time and practitioner at the same time, and that has allowed me to understand what that environment is like. And the last one, and my last thought of my talk, is I think for each and every one of us, even as students or private citizens, I think it's very important that we understand what climate policy is, how it affects each and every one of us, and how, I would submit to you, the driver for how we're going to achieve our climate goals and climate reductions. And so I would just say an event like this is perfect learning opportunity for all 3 of these points. And so I would say that thank you very much to PICS and the BC government for hosting this opportunity and bringing us all together. And with that, I look forward to meeting with all of you at the breakout session. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Thomas, for that. And also thank you for the smooth segue into Jeremy's slides. Maybe I'll just quickly introduce you as well, but please feel free to come up. As you can potentially read from the slide, Jeremy is the Assistant Deputy Minister for Climate Change at the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change Strategy. Ooh, you're reading over my shoulder. Ooh. Do I have the right bio? Another Jeremy Humid in the room? Anyone? Anyone? In this role, he works with an incredible team of professionals at the Climate Action Secretariat, including Alana, who are responsible for delivering BC's climate action agenda. So this includes reducing carbon pollution and preparing for the impacts of a changing climate in partnership with Indigenous people, local governments, business, non-governmental organizations, and youth, all of you. So please join me in welcoming Jeremy to the stage.
Hi, everyone. and thank you, Tessica. Thank you for the invite, by the way. So I think most folks here know Tessica, but Tessica is just an incredible, well, she's an incredible leader, frankly, and has been a key part of the development of the CleanBC plan, which is the provincial government's climate policy, climate action plan. I want to thank you for organizing this event, and you've been talking to us about doing this for some time, so I'm really happy to be here. I do want to, how do I move these? Here? Great. I, of course, want to acknowledge that we are on the traditional territories of the Coast Salish people, Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh, and it's just such a privilege to be able to do our work and play on this wonderful land. And thank you to all of you as well for showing up tonight, taking time out of your busy schedule. Honestly, and I don't want this to sound cheesy or trite, but the leadership that's being shown by young people across the province is absolutely inspiring and is making a real difference and is helping to move the dial in terms of what government is doing to act on climate. So Tessica asked me to speak a little bit about what the provincial government is doing on climate change, and to speak specifically about CleanBC, which is our climate action plan, but it's also an economic plan and an energy plan. And I do want to say, as I mentioned before, that this plan was developed with the advice and the guidance and the support of our advisory council, which included stakeholders and representatives from Indigenous communities, industry, youth, labor, etc. And for the past 2 years, they have been advising me, the minister, the premier, and the province as we developed this plan. And I should also recognize as well that the plan was developed with the support and guidance of the government's partners in the Green Caucus. Those of you that have been around climate policy for a while will probably recognize this slide, or a slide like it. You see them everywhere. This is essentially what we hope, thanks to the good modelers at SFU and at Navius, this is what we hope and think our plan will do. We think that the plan will get us 75% of the way to our 2030 target. And we are totally candid and honest about the point that it is only 75% of the way. There's more work to do. But if you compare our progress in BC compared to the rest of North America, we are in a good spot. But that, that does not mean we should not be doing more. And I'm going to get into some more detail on the specific policies later. It's important that we talk a little bit about the BC landscape and sort of the scenario that we're operating in as we develop climate policy. And really that landscape, it offers opportunities and challenges. And we are blessed in BC with virtually a 100% clean hydro grid, which is great. We can use that clean hydro to power economic growth. We can use that clean hydro to support our partner jurisdictions as they want to move off coal. But it also makes things a heck of a lot more difficult for people like me and the minister that have to come up with ideas to hit our super ambitious climate targets. Because we can't shut down a coal plant and get 25% of the way to our target. That's done. We've also had a carbon price in place in BC for a long time, over 10 years now. We have North America's highest carbon tax, and industry in BC pays the highest carbon price anywhere in the world. So that low-hanging fruit is gone as well. We also have the most stringent low-carbon fuel standard in North America and probably the world. And we have the highest adoption of zero-emission vehicles per capita in North America. So we're doing a lot of good things in BC, but as you saw, it still only gets us 25% of the way there. Or I'm sorry, 75% of the way there. We also need to be realistic about the fact that we are still a resource-based economy, and that the economic base of this province is still resources. And a lot of times it takes a lot of emissions and energy to extract those resources and sell them to the world. So as we try to do that in a more clean way, we need to think carefully about how that impacts the real people that depend on those jobs, and the fact that the revenue that we get as a province to pay for schools, hospitals, etc., comes largely from our resource-based economy. So we just need to be alive to that. Another, I think, really important piece around the BC landscape, and this is a credit to the cabinet and to government, is that we have industry in BC on side with CleanBC. And if you look around the rest of Canada, and certainly the United States, there's a lot more tension. But in BC, they've been able to develop the plan in a way that still has industry, the heavy emitters of the province, on side. A little more context as well. I think this is important, and I don't want you to misinterpret this slide. I think a lot of people would say, look at tiny BC in the top left corner. What we do doesn't matter, so we should just throw up our arms and not do anything. We need to be realistic about the fact that even if we reduced our emissions to 0 in BC, that wouldn't make one bit of difference. But we should also be alive to the fact that we can make real positive change in the world, and I think the carbon tax is a really good example of that. We are literally known around the world for our carbon tax and for our climate policy, and the fact that we've been able to price carbon at a meaningful and high level since 2008 and still have economic growth that outperforms the rest of the country. So yes, we're a small player in the big scheme of things, but we can make a real difference, and we should absolutely do our part. So as I mentioned, Tessica did want me to go through quickly kind of what's in CleanBC. I am gonna do this quickly, because we're a little bit over time, and frankly, I don't think anyone here wants to hear a long list of climate policies. But there's sort of a few. Yeah, wrong crowd, hey? Yeah, I forgot what crowd I'm in. Yeah. But really, there's a few ways we can do this, right? So you hear a lot about pricing carbon pollution, okay? That's kind of universally accepted as the most economically efficient and effective way to reduce emissions. So we're doing that with the highest carbon price in North America. Where carbon pricing doesn't make sense, we can use regulation. So an example of that is in methane emissions in the upstream. Hard to measure that, hard to price that, so we develop regulations that say, industry, you need to reduce your methane your methane emissions by X% by X date. We should provide incentives, and we do that as well. So yes, the carbon tax is in itself an incentive, but we should also be able to support folks that are looking to make changes with a little bit of help through an incentive. We also need to be investing in the jobs of tomorrow and the economic opportunities that will be coming up as a result of both the changing climate and our action to mitigate greenhouse gas emissions, and we're doing that. And we should also be thinking carefully about investing in technology where and when it makes sense. So the next few slides go through kind of the various sectors of the economy and the areas we're taking action. So in terms of clean vehicles, we now have legislation in the province that absolutely by law, by 2040, every single new vehicle in the province will have to be a zero-emission vehicle. It will be illegal to sell an internal combustion engine vehicle in BC in 2040, and there are targets on the way between now and then. As I mentioned, we also have incentives. If you have a car that's about 5 years or older now, you can trade that in and get $6,000 from the scrap program, $5,000 from the from the federal government, and $3,000 from the provincial government towards a new electric vehicle. And by the way, it's a great place to have an EV in BC because of the fact that we've got super high gas prices, which we don't like to talk about a lot, and super cheap hydro. So it really makes sense to buy an EV here. And we're also, as a government, making a ton of investments in charging stations as well. I mentioned the low carbon fuel standard that basically calls for the share or the percentage of low carbon products in the fuel stream to be 20% by 2030. As I said, that's the most ambitious in North America. And we're also setting new tailpipe standards for vehicles sold after 2025. We are having incentives if people own their home, and I think we should talk about renters at some point as well, because that's a real tough nut to crack, so that might be something for the table. But if you own your home, you're eligible for a ton of incentives to improve the energy efficiency of your home by a heat pump, get better insulation, windows, etc. We are strengthening the building code, which means that new builders have to hit new energy and GHG efficiency standards when they build new. The natural gas that comes into a lot of our homes and buildings, there's a minimum requirement now of 15% of that to come from renewable sources, again, by 2030. And we're making some direct investments in the rural areas of the province to help them get off diesel. Industry. So this is one we hear about a lot. and we are helping them make a transition as well. So we have an industry fund that they can apply to if they wish to invest in projects that will reduce the emissions at their operations. We're working with heavy-duty vehicle fleet operators to reduce emissions from their operations. That's another really tough area, frankly, because the battery technology isn't where it needs to be able to power those heavy vehicles. What we're doing is we're investing in some pilot projects as well as some R&D. I mentioned the methane emission reductions. This is a big deal for a lot of folks, as it should be. Methane is very potent. It's a very potent greenhouse gas. It's difficult to measure. So we are requiring upstream oil and gas facilities to reduce their emissions from methane by 45% by 2025. And we're also helping industry electrify and developing a framework for carbon capture and storage. Reducing emissions from waste is another area. We're making investments for communities to make sure that 95% of organic waste is diverted away from the landfill. And we're also developing a circular economy strategy now as well, which actually could be another good discussion topic. Slide's a little wonky here, but I mentioned that we want to make sure British Columbians are prepared for the economy of the future. Economy of the future is such a kind of a buzzword. Who knows what that means? But we know, for starters, that we're going to need people who know how to work on a zero-emission vehicle. We're going to need people that can do home retrofits, can install heat pumps, etc. So we're making investments into our post-secondary education system and elsewhere to help people get those skills they need. But this is interesting here, the CleanBC Job Readiness Plan. It's working with stakeholders and experts to really figure out what those skills are and the training we should be investing in now to make sure British Columbians are ready. And a big part of that, of course, is what we call the just transition, right? So we don't talk about that as much in BC because, again, we're not shutting down a bunch of coal plants because we don't have any. But it's still a factor that there will be some sectors of the economy in BC that are operating today that may not be in 10, 20, 30 years. And we need to support people that are in those communities and working in those sectors. I'll pass over this slide quickly because it's similar to what I showed before, but we are expecting to have some real impact from the policies that we're taking, and they have all been independently modeled by Navius. And our whole methodology book and assumptions book is online. It's something like 200 pages, and I'm told it's the first time a government has been that transparent in terms of the modeling and the assumptions that they've done. So it's all available publicly if you really want to dig into it. The progress slide, and which I hear, Tessica, I guess we do. So there's 41 actions in CleanBC. They're all underway now. We've got 2 complete, so that's not a great kind of percentage, but a lot of them are long-term out to 2030. We want to be connecting people. We want to be engaging with people, and this is a great opportunity to do it focused on youth. And as I said, 18.9 megatons. That's what we expect to reduce by 2030. 18.9 megatons. No one knows what that actually is or means, but it is again a 33% a 40% reduction below 2007 levels by 2030. This pie graph shows where we expect those reductions to come from. You'll see that we do expect the bulk to come from industry, so they are definitely doing their share. We also expect a lot from transportation, but again, fully transparent that we have got more work to do, and we still got to find these additional tons. And in a jurisdiction like BC, where we've already got clean hydro, we've already got a carbon tax, we've already got a ton of world-leading policies, it gets super expensive and super challenging to find these additional tons, as we say. So we really need to think creatively and engage with folks as we figure out how to hit our targets, which we're fully committed to doing. Of course, if the whole world stopped emitting carbon today, I'm just going to get rid of this binder. If the entire world stopped emitting carbon today, we would still see the impacts in BC. And BC, as a northern jurisdiction, is especially vulnerable to those impacts. We actually released something called a climate risk assessment this summer, first of its kind in North America, where we took 15 scenarios like wildfire, drought, seasonal water shortage, Lyme disease was one of them, and essentially tried to figure out the likelihood of those events in 2050 if the climate changes as we expect it will. And not surprisingly, all those scenarios are much more likely thanks to a changing climate, and we're using those results to develop an adaptation strategy which will be released in 2020, and we just announced, or just started, an engagement process which is online. We announced that last week. If you Google BC adaptation strategy, you'll find it there, and I really encourage you to participate in the moderated discussions, etc. Obviously, the perspectives and knowledge of Indigenous people is incredibly important to us in BC, and we just introduced UNDRIP legislation a couple of weeks ago, so this government's fully committed to UNDRIP. I'll say that on the adaptation side in particular, we are incredibly interested in working directly with Indigenous people to understand their perspectives and how they've been living on the land and adapting to changing climates here in British Columbia since time immemorial. So our commitment is to work directly with Indigenous people as that plan is developed. So Tessica and others came up with a few discussion questions that I think will be the focus of one or more tables, but I'm sure you'll cover that when you get up. So that's a quick kind of play-by-play on the plan. We're proud of the plan, but we're also, as I said, fully transparent about the fact that A, it's just a plan, not all of it has been implemented. We're still 11 years out from our target date, and we need to be thinking about 2050 as well. We're also transparent about the fact that it only gets us 75% of the way to the target. That's good, especially when you compare it to other jurisdictions around North America, but that doesn't mean it's good enough. And we need to do more, and we'll continue to roll out plans, additional policies, and strengthen policies we have already to be able to hit those targets. And we're really keen to hear from you all this evening on what we should be doing better and what we should be doing more. So thank you very much. Okay, thanks.
And just a quick heads up that you can find the plan online, but also Alana's brought over some plans, and they're also there to the right or to the left, your left of the room. So there's the full report, 65 pages if you're interested in reading it. There's also a 2-pager, so a summary of what Jeremy shared. And then there's also, as he mentioned, the climate adaptation or the preparedness as the language that's being used by government. I really do want to thank both Jeremy and Alana for coming today and for sharing, because I think it's really important. I've been advising on this Climate Advisory Council, and it has been, I think I have a lot of distrust in government and as many potentially youth do. And so sitting there at the table and learning more, and of course I didn't always agree, and I think especially in a table of 22 of us from different industry, nonprofit, environmental, different backgrounds, we disagreed often, but I think it was really informative, and it was useful to have those conversations across differences and to reduce some of that polarization and that siloing. And I think really part of the both of you coming over from Victoria is also part of building a stronger dialogue and building more trust between government and potentially finding ways and places where there is common ground despite our differences as well. And with that, I did want to acknowledge that there are other representatives from local government that are also here as well. If you're comfortable, as I name or share the government, feel free to wave or to stand if you want. We have someone from the city of Vancouver here today. Yes, yeah, if you would like to, yeah.
Thank you. If you join our Green City listserv at vancouver.ca/greencity, I think you can find it there. We'll be definitely providing information about all upcoming opportunities through there. So excited to see so many people here. And just to reiterate comments earlier, that really seeing youth activism is what's it's making a difference. So thank you for that.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And for all of the adult allies in the room, you don't have to share as much, but Amanda did want to talk about and plug the engagement that's happening in February, so that's really important. There's also some representatives from Metro Vancouver, a couple across the room, if you just want to stand and wave, and if you want to chat from some of the folks from Metro Vancouver, yeah, Roger Kwan as well, and folks from the Educational Sustainability Youth for Action. So there's a couple, yeah, of you in the room as well. Wonderful. And then I also see some folks from the Suzuki Elders that are here. Really grateful for you being here, Diana. And really, I think important that we have some of these conversations as youth, but then also intergenerationally, so we can look to figure out where that mentorship and also where we can find decision makers that are willing to listen and to work with us as well. And with that, we're closing the part of the night where we are listening a lot to the front of the room, and we're starting the dialogue. And so just to share a little bit about the purpose of this dialogue, first off, as I mentioned, I really want it to be useful to you and to the reason why you came here and to your communities that you're part of, whether that's you define it as your family or the folks from a race or a religion or from a school or from your sports teams, like figuring out what does that mean, community, because I think we all have spheres of influences within our own communities, however we define that. And so I wanted you to take a minute to pause and to reflect on what brought you to this event tonight. What are you hoping to share? What are you hoping to learn or potentially unlearn, to reflect on, to give, or to find? And how can this next portion of the evening be most beneficial to you and your community as well? So just a couple of moments to reflect on that. If it's helpful for you, there's some sheets of paper on the tables as well if you want to jot down a couple notes. But really to center, why is it that you're here? So I'll give you about 30 seconds to do that. And so the format of this dialogue is called Open Space, if any of you have heard of that. And the way that this happens is that there can be multiple facilitated or unfacilitated conversations at each table about a different theme or a different conversation. And so we have a couple themes that our speakers here wanted to have conversations about and that are really curious to learn more, but also to share their wealth of experience and knowledge. But then I also wanted to offer that opportunity to anyone here in this room as well, to stand up and to propose a theme. I think there were many different interesting topic ideas, from renters to decarbonization, to adaptation, to the potential of tech, the connections with food and with land, with Indigenous sovereignty and UNDRIP, the United Nations Declarations on the Rights of Indigenous People, circular economy and waste, education, government partnerships, a just transition. Those are just some that I heard from earlier this evening, and so there's only 10 tables, unfortunately, so only 10 conversations, and that's way more than that. Yeah, I wanted to, if there are any of you that are really interested in hosting a conversation, this is also your space to do that. So logistically, we have 10 tables, and we have 4 speakers who already have some topics to propose, so we have space for 6 more conversations, but if there are more than that come up, we can also kind of find some spaces outside or in a corner or pulling some chairs together to make a circle as well. So I'm sure we can make it work. And with that, I just wanted to ask each of the speakers to introduce the topic that they were interested in sharing about. Short, 10, 20, 30 seconds if you need. And either that mic or you can come up here.
Can everyone hear me? Yes, okay. So I'm really interested in talking about, again, I mentioned in my presentation, the intersections of climate change, so really kind of unpacking how it's an intersectional social justice issue and really looking at how it disproportionately impacts marginalized communities and how we can really center those voices. So that's what I want to talk about.
And sorry, actually I've been told that just for the folks that are watching online, if you can come up to the podium, that might be easier for them to see because I think they have the camera trained here. Is that cool?
So I'm saying again, So I want to talk about the intersections of climate change, so thinking about how we can center marginalized voices and how it is disproportionately impacting marginalized communities and how we really need to center that in all the work we do. So that's what I want to talk about.
And as I mentioned, I'm looking forward to talking about the intergenerational knowledge transfer, both up and down, especially as being a youth. I'm looking forward to how we get our voices heard in raising it up. But also, I really wanted to talk about what other communities are doing and organizations and families are doing as well. So not just from, a family kind of point, but also all of the different ways that we're kind of moving it up and down.
I'm very interested in talking about youth activism. I wonder why. So let's have a nice conversation about what it means to be a youth activist, how we can support other youth activists, not just in Vancouver, and what inspires you about it, like what you're interested about, just anything.
My name's Erji. I guess I'm interested in talking about what we can do as individuals and how we can hold local governments' feet to the fire. So, like city officials, getting them on their targets, and then how that could also relate to BC as well. And I guess we'll find a spot.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Anyone else that's interested in having a conversation? Yeah, feel free to come up.
Hi, I'd love to have a conversation with others around collaborating rather than competing for scarce funding resources for the activities that we do.
What's your name?
My name is Sarah.
Collaboration. Awesome.
Funding.
Oh, yes, and funding. Awesome. Anyone else? Yeah, feel free to come up. And please introduce yourself, pronouns if you feel comfortable.
Hi, my name is Narayan, and I am here because I'm super interested in all of these mid-century strategies for decarbonization, like CleanBC. And so one of the speakers mentioned there's still 25% of reductions they need to make. So I'm really interested in thinking of ways that they can do that to reduce emissions more than they already are.
And feel free to come up as you feel comfortable. I'm just going to note take up here on the different topics so that I can read them back out to you, and we can each assign a table as well. So if you're interested, come on up.
My name is George Benson. I'm really interested to have a conversation about adaptation. We have the provincial adaptation strategy that's coming online, but there's so many facets of adaptation that we can talk about at the community level, at the local level, and everything in between here where we are all the way up to the province and the federal government. So I think there's a lot of facets that young people haven't gotten involved with that yet, and I'd love to see that conversation deepen. So adaptation.
Anyone else that wants to lead a conversation?
Hey, my name's Aaron. My pronouns are he, him, his. I'm really interested in the role of public education and supporting young leaders to learn more about sustainability and environmental action and how we support their actions in the public school system.
Thanks, Aaron.
I'm Alice. Shorter. I would be interested in having a conversation on circular economy transition, which I think we could also loop just transition into as well, especially the opportunity, particular in BC, with China no longer accepting recycling from other countries, how that can open up some industry opportunities here.
Circular economy, just transition. Yeah, come on up.
Hello, my name's Anitra Paris, and my coworker and I often talk about this at work, so I'd really love to get your guys' opinion on this about how do we build more diversity into leadership roles, so capacity building for First Nation communities, more women, just more racial diversity. I plan conferences, and oftentimes C-suite level it's hard to get diversity, and so would love everyone's opinion on that and that conversation. Thanks.
Can you say it one more time? Diversity and
Leadership roles? I don't know. Yeah. Yeah.
diversity and leadership roles. Perfect. Thank you. We have room for one more conversation. And if there isn't, I think we also had a conversation about having one specifically on the CleanBC plan. And the 3 questions that were up there on the board as well, just giving feedback on the CleanBC plan and potentially having a chance to take a look at the report or the 2-page summary and giving concrete feedback to the province that can be collected. So that will be our last dialogue conversation topics. So I might actually ask each of the speakers and also all the folks that have volunteered to lead a table just to stand up for a moment so we can all see where you are. And just quickly, popcorn style, if you can just do in a 1-sentence summary. If you want to talk about blah, come talk to me. And also if all the panelists could pick a table that's not yet assigned. I see there's 2 of you at one table, so if one of you could move to a table that's not assigned. And then if the 4 of you can pick the rest of the tables that are open, and I will, yeah, that sounds good? Okay. So if you want to kick us off.
If you want to talk about adaptation.
Yeah.
If you want to talk about additional ways to reduce emissions from the province and decarbonize the province and the economy.
Decarbonization. Yeah. Can someone pass the mic over so that it can be caught?
Oh, there we go. Yep. So if you'd like to talk about how to hold local government's feet to the fire. Hi, I'm Alice. If you want to talk about circular economy / just transition, over here at this table.
Hi, I'm Brady. If you want to talk about intergenerational knowledge transfer, I'm over here at this table.
Hi, y'all. Adriana, if you want to talk about intersectionality and uplifting marginalized voices, up here.
So hopefully there was at least one topic. Maybe there are a couple topics that are of interest to you. In a moment, I'll give a couple more instructions just about the dialogue so that you... Yes, sorry, Thomas, one more. Yes, I think maybe if the 2 of you can combine, that would be great, because I think intersectionality and diversity and leadership. And then Thomas will have one last table for research. Right. And Sam, go for it. Youth activism and engagement. And I realize I miscounted. So there's one more, the one around CleanBC, but I think that could also be anyone at any table can give feedback on CleanBC. On your tables, there should be pads with lined paper. If there aren't, come find us and we can give you, but if you want to just give us any written comments, I can put those questions that's just up on the board. So if you want either alone time or if you are at the table but still want to give some feedback on the CleanBC plan, please write that down and give it over to the table there where CleanBC is boothing later this evening. So that would be a great way for us to still get that feedback. Okay, so I know that there might be a little bit of confusion. It might take a little bit of time for everyone to figure out where they want to be. But I just want to share a couple community agreements. So this is called the Law of 2 Feet. Has anyone heard of this? Hands up. Okay, a couple of folks in the room. It's really simple. It just means that go to the topic that you're interested in. And if at any moment, because this conversation is really about being useful to you, if you feel like that this conversation isn't where you actually want to be, feel free to get up and to find another conversation. So don't feel stuck, and also the facilitators won't feel offended. It's really not about them, it's about you and what you want to get out of this conversation. I'm serious. I'm dead serious about this. The second one is just to share the space. So just being mindful if you're someone that likes to speak a lot, being mindful of how much time you're taking, and then also for folks who might want to listen a bit more, that's totally fine. And if you feel comfortable, please do push yourself to share. Though I think we all know that participation looks like all forums, and just showing up is awesome and great. And the last one is just to be respectful. I think it sounds really simple, but I think there might be differences in opinions. We don't all have to agree tonight, but I think it's just about having the conversation together and to hear each other out and to seek to understand. So I think your table facilitators might have more if they're interested in adding to that, because this is just 3 and it's by no means a comprehensive list. And if there are things that you need at the table to make your to feel like you can participate fully, feel free to share that as well. And so just as we're diving into these conversations, I'm going to do a quick time check. Can someone give me 7:25? Okay, so we don't have a lot of time for this conversation because we were hoping to wrap up by 8 o'clock so that anyone who needs to leave can leave. But we do have the space until like 9, even 10. So I was hoping that the event could end at 8:30, like fully. And so if folks want to stay for a bit longer, I think people can stay and continue to have the conversation. But we will have an unofficial close at 8, so that anyone who needs to leave at 8 can leave, and anyone who's interested in staying and continuing those conversations can be here until we're kicked out of the building. So that's kind of the piece. And just the final thing, because I don't think we all know each other, before we start the conversation, if you can introduce yourself, your name, your pronouns, and just with that question, what brought you here, what is one thing that you're hoping to learn or share to give, and that way the facilitators all can hear those needs as well, and hopefully accommodate and adjust a little their presentation and their talk or this dialogue and the framing to meet what you're hoping to get out of this conversation. Are there any questions? I think there might be, and that's okay if there are any questions. Feel free to ask us for help, or if you're like, oh, this topic, who is leading this topic again? I think there's a couple of us that can answer that question, and we'll help you get settled. There are dishes on the table, and so if you're able to, as you're moving, to just bring your dishes to the back where that black kind of table is and stack them up there, I think that'll make it easier for us to have a dialogue. And then Alana is also going to help put out chart paper on every single table so we can take some notes as well. And other than that, feel free to get started. But I did just want to wrap up and say some thank yous for the folks that need to leave. This is your moment as well. If you do really have something pressing that you need to go to, don't feel bad about doing that. But just to close off, I really wanted to share some big thank yous. First of all, to the speakers. If you can all stand, and can we all give them a huge round of applause? Please stand. Please stand. Own it. This is your moment. I see you. Okay. I also want to thank our core organizing team, Anastenka, Alana, Sarah, for all the hard work and all the calls that we've been on. It's so good to be in person together today at this event. And also Imran for helping out tonight. Can we give a huge round of applause to the folks helping out? And then also just a big thank you to the folks at the back who have been helping us live stream and connecting this event to folks who can't make it here in person as well. Cool. Sweet. And last but not least, I just want to thank each and every one of you who are here in this room. It's been such a pleasure, and so many of you stepping up and leading conversations on the fly, but also really just showing up and being here so fully and so present on a late Thursday evening. It's been such a wonder, and I'm so proud to be part of this movement with so many of you, and it gives me so much hope to be doing this work. Yeah, an applause for yourself. And then, of course, to all the adult allies that we have in the room, the folks from CAS, from the Climate Action Secretariat, the Government of BC, from Metro Vancouver, yes, you know who you are, from the City of Vancouver, from the David Suzuki Elders, and so many other organizations, Co-Design, who is also here, Thank you so much for being here. I think it's so critical that while this is youth-centered, that there are adults and there are elders in the room that we can have these intergenerational conversations with. And I would invite the youth organizations that are here in the room to, of course, center youth, but also to figure out ways for us to partner and to build and collaborate. I think that's the magic of, and the hope for this event tonight. There are so many youth organizations that I see that are doing incredible work all across the region and the province and based here in Vancouver, but also doing work federally and internationally. And sometimes we just don't even have the time to have conversations with each other because we're so busy flying off to this or doing work somewhere. And so I'm really grateful for each and every one of you for coming out tonight and having these conversations. And I hope that this is just the beginning and a space, a launching pad for new ideas, new projects, new hopes, new dreams, new fears as well. But and just a couple shout outs. There are a couple organizations that have brought their materials that have different opportunities and more information about the CleanBC plan as well. So once you're done the dialogues and if you want to peruse or you need some alone time, feel free to take a look over there. And that's all for tonight. Thank you everyone so much.